tell you what. I'll tell you a story about my one of the largest bucks I've ever shot. If you're into the tape measure, he's probably the most tape measure friendly buck for sure I've ever shot. But I've never put anything in a record book, whatever. So, years ago, I went hunting with this guy. I was just kind of new to the Whistler, Squamish, Pemberton areas, and I went hunting with this guy, and he took me to his place. And it was snow on the ground, and it was really thick and nasty. And he said that it used to be really good until it grew up. He said, it's too thick. It's too thick to hunt around here. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, it's too thick. I'm not hunting here. Let's get out of here. But I looked on the ground, and I noticed this deer print. And being from Vancouver Island and more accustomed to hunting those, 120-pound bucks, I seen this print in the ground. I just about fell over. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did you see that buck print? The print is freaking huge. And I'll never forget that moment. And this guy that I was hunting with, he wasn't too concerned about it. So we left, but I never forgot about that. I'd go guiding for a few months, and then I would come back and run the odd job, construction in Whistler. But I had the travel bug, and I had my stuff in storage back then, and I'd go rattle off a job in Whistler, and then I'd just take off. So I wasn't really big into hunting there yet. And then when I started living there full time, I went straight back to that zone, and I started hunting the way I normally hunt. And sure enough, here's these monster footprints around that area. I started leaving my truck quite a ways away from where I was hunting, and I'd hike in there. It's just a habit. I started hunting the tracks. I didn't even have a trail camera then. I really hunted hard, and I ended up, I think it's the second year hunting that area hard. I shot a couple other bucks my first year there, meat deer. I wasn't even familiar with how big bucks got around there. I knew that one buck was going to be huge, and I shot a pretty big buck. And I knew the head CO at the time, Chris Doyle. He came driving up, and I was coming out of the hills with this buck in my truck, and he said, "Whoa, that's a good one." I'm like, "Yeah, is it really? I haven't a clue. This would be a monster from the island, but some of the tracks I'm seeing, there's some big deer on here." And he goes, "No, that's a pretty good buck." I had this big 3-point. But those tracks just drove me up the wall. So I went back there the next year. So now we're year 2. And sure enough, it started dumping snow, and I started learning more and more, hiking farther out, hiking farther up, really starting to learn that whole mountain. And boom, there's monster buck tracks, chasing doe tracks. You can see he's dogging her in the timber, thick bush, real thick. You only see about 50 yards. And he's dogging her, running around all over the place. So I started trailing him, and I could see where he was making rubs. But we're talking like a stick like this. He'd make a rub on that where we would normally see a tiny rub like that and think, oh, it's just a tiny buck. No. Sure, you can see a big rub in the timber on the willow, big, massive, nasty rub, and obviously it's a mature rack. But these bucks, they are responsible for those teeny weeny rubs too. Trust me, I followed that buck and doe around for about 3 hours. And he probably made about 6 or 7 rubs in that time. And he was just chasing that doe and dogging her and chasing her and running her in circles. And then finally, there they are. They're about 40 yards in front of me, looking at me. I'm like, oh my God, this great big 6x7 or something. And one of the largest blacktails I'd ever seen in my life at the time. And I couldn't get the shot off. She took one look at me, whoops, and she booked it. And he didn't seem too concerned about me because obviously nobody really hunted around there in that thick crap. And they took off. Saw me, took off. I'm like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. What did I do? I left. Because they'd seen me, and I didn't want them to leave. She's hot. I wanted them to hopefully think I'm a mushroom picker, whatever, a tree spacer, anything. But I did not want them to think that I was there to kill them and eat them. And I knew they would be there tomorrow. And I didn't want to go. It was just too thick. I couldn't risk going after them because there wasn't an open area to push them out into and shoot them. So I needed to leave. I left, killed me, but I left. And then I came back in. I remember I went to the local hunting store and I told them flat out that afternoon, I said, I will have a monster Boone and Crockett blacktail deer in here before noon tomorrow. Mark my words. It will be dead and I'll have it here tomorrow. And I said that. So I left, I went home, could barely sleep. I got up early in the morning in the dark. And I hiked up into there. I got into that one little clearing exactly where I last saw them. And I sat there and I kept my eyes closed. And I opened my eyes hoping for that night vision to come You just wanted to get light out. I couldn't see enough yet. I closed my eyes, open them up. I'm starting to see things, but I couldn't quite see enough to see antler in front of me at 40 yards. And then as soon as I was confident I could see antler, I thought I could see antler, I tipped my can collar, started to rattle the horns a bit. Here comes this thing from my left, and I couldn't make it out through the willow, and he's grunting his face off, and he goes from my left to my right and out of sight at about 40, 50 yards, and it was just too early. I just about had a nervous breakdown. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I couldn't even see my crosshairs properly. I just couldn't do it. 40 yards, 50 yards. And then it wasn't probably 10 minutes later, there was not a doubt in my mind I could smoke that sucker if I seen him again. So then I cut loose with the antlers and the can, and here he came bouncing right back in front of me. Here's a picture of him where he lay dead. You can see this thick stuff, and I smoked him at about 30, 35 years. He came up from my dead center and came back, and I shot him. He was like a 142-inch buck or something, whatever he had on him. Great big buck. You can see him here in the picture. So I'm all stoked. I drug him out, threw him in the truck, took him in, showed him off to everybody, and I hung him up, and I'm cutting him up, and I looked at his feet, and I'm like, and I actually cut one of his feet off, and I pressed it in the snow at home. I'm like, that's not the buck I've been after. There's no way that is the buck that owns the footprints that I've been after. It's not him. It's not him. Game on.